All right, fellas, thanks so much for coming out today. I'm going to get started. I'm just going to do a real brief intro. I was been telling my assistant, Jeremiah Carter, I said, man, when the person the president, you shouldn't have to go through a whole lot of telling you everything but they the president. And so I think that's enough. So thanks to Professor Johnson for coming out and hanging with us today. He's the president of Tuskegee, the 7th president of Tuskegee University. And I'll just say quickly, very quickly, that there's a few institutions that are most important in African American history and culture. There's the Schomburg Center in New York. There's the Moreland Spinyard Collection at Howard University. And there's Tuskegee University, which is most important in our history. Today is going to be about you all, though. Question and answer. I told him he's going to give a brief intro, and then we're going to take questions. Our good Brother Jones is going to point out who's, raising hands. He'll point out who'll go next. And brief, let me just say, Brother Jones got us here today. Thanks so much for that, Mike Jones, getting us all here. This is our last event, 3 days. We've done a lot of things for young folks starting at 7 years old on Monday. We did high school guys yesterday, and today is you all. So questions and answers about leadership. So that's it. So thanks for coming.
Definitely. First of all, I just want to thank all of you. Thank Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Thank Brother Jones here. Definitely thank Brother Jeremiah Carter, who I've just met here, and also Howard Ransby. I should probably tell you that Howard Ransby and I are both graduates of HBCUs, he being Tougaloo, and myself being a graduate of John C. Smith University. We both, he graduated in 1999, I graduated in 1995, 4 years his senior, as it were. And the way in which we were connected, we both were a part of what's called the UNCF Andrew W. Mellon Foundation program. And basically the Mellon Foundation played an instrumental role in both of our academic careers. It trained African American students, men and women, to go on to the professoriate, to teach you about graduate school, to teach you about an academic career. And so obviously Howard has spent 12 years here at SIUE. I started off as a professor and a scholar like Howard, but I went into administration, and then I ascended to a presidency. And so it's my pleasure to be here. I'm very thankful. Howard has clearly given you my bio, and I'm really appreciative that he didn't spend a lot of time reading through that. You can easily find me on the university website. You can click on the Office of the President and find out anything you want to know about me, bio, publications, speeches, or anything like that. But right now, I'm here for you. I came here because of Howard in part, Brother Jones in part, but really for you 30, because if I must say anything, the single most important aspect, I think, in ascending to a position of leadership was, frankly, the kind of impact and the kind of influence that men and women had on my life when I was sitting in those seats. Whether it's a fraternity member, whether it's meeting a high-level president, meeting major speakers. I was telling Jeremiah that I was the same position, graduate student, senior, honors college student, SGA leader, driving around leaders. And it's really not these big public forums where you're really going to get that impact. The impact is, whoa, you're going to open their lives up to you in a Q&A, because like W.B. Du Bois, like Booker T. Washington, like Susan B. Anthony, like Frederick Douglass, like any man or woman, they were real people. They had a real story. And it's really in learning those stories that you find out how to apply it in your life. So with that being said, these experiences are helpful. And then also, I always like to make sure you understand that reading is helpful, because if you never get to meet those people, those men and women have written books, including myself. So if you wish to learn more of those things, you just simply look up those books and then apply it to yourself in any other way that you might not get answered today. So without further ado, I know we have a small period of time. I'm going to let Brother Jones do the Q&A, and I'll try to provide very succinct answers, partly because I want to let everybody get a chance to get at me. And it was not my intention to have such a small period of time. It was the time period allotted. So if I get a chance to shake some hands afterwards, I'd certainly appreciate it, but I do know I have a plane to catch as well. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my Brother Jones.
Thank you. All right, my brother Jarrell.
My name is Jarrell Lewis. I'm a freshman at here at SIUE. I'm also a biological science major.
Okay.
My first and I'm from East St. Louis.
Okay.
My first question is, what does it take to run, such a powerful institution? So it was founded by Booker T. Washington, 1881.
Yeah.
That's a strong role right there. What does it take?
What does it take? Let me say this. I know these questions always are pretty general, but let me just tell you, and we're talking about leadership here, I think it's all about the person behind the position. We spend a lot of time talking about positions, but really, at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to the person behind the position. And one of the ways in which I like to think about that is, I have this saying I talk about: character is not your highest moment, character is not your lowest moment, character is your most consistent moment. So when you ask me what does it take to run a multi-million-dollar institution that's as prestigious as Tuskegee, it's about my most consistent moment. And I always tell people, what do I do most consistently? And you all can assess what your character is by just sit down and evaluate your day. You find out in 24 hours what do you do most consistently, that's probably going to tell you what your character is. Well, my character is simply this: I read, I write, I work, I go home. That's my character. And over time, that's evolution, because obviously I was a college student, graduate student, professor, scholar, administrator. But as you move forward into ascending into leadership, one of the things you learn how to spend your time. And obviously reading and writing is fundamental to anything what you're doing. Working, because we're all going to be working. And going home, what does that space look like for you? For me, it's my wife and my 2 sons. I've been married for 15 years. And of course, obviously, in that working and that reading, that's where my hobbies are at too. And being at home with my family and my boys, I like that. So it makes it very simple, because that's my lifestyle. And so when you ask, well, how am I able to do it? It's because working is part of those 4 things that I do most consistently.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Hey, Dr.
Hey.
Jeremy Miller from Savannah, Georgia.
Okay.
Currently a grad student working on.
Close enough to shake your hand. I probably shake his hand too. I'm sorry if I won't be able to shake everybody's hand.
Currently a graduate student working on getting my master's in college student personnel administration, ideally higher education. So wondering about that. After you finish your master's and your doctorate, what was one of the most challenging things you've actually faced actually working in the field of higher education?
Oh, yeah, good job. I probably should give you a little bit about my background. As I indicated, Dr. Ramsey and I, we both were a part of preparing to be professors. And so we were in, not so much, we were in higher education, but we were in academic fields. English, my area was 17th, 19th century American literature. I had an ad hoc minor in African American literature. But pretty much our part in entering into higher education was through the classroom. You start off as assistant professor, associate professor. Dr. Ramsey went on to earn tenure. And essentially, being in a classroom is a little different from personnel administration and higher ed. However, so our initial concerns was obviously what? You get a PhD, we write books, write articles, teach. But when your particular track, as well as when I began to do more than just become a professor and a scholar, what were some of the challenges? Well, obviously, you're learning about an entire enterprise. You asked a question about, well, what do you have to know? Well, you see, running a university, you kind of got to know student affairs. You got to know accreditation. You got to know money and mechanics, how to manage a budget. So you think about your budget. You know how much money comes in every week. You know how much you pay it out. Well, multiply that by millions of dollars. You know how you spend your money. Student issues, some of the things you might be concerned with. Well, in higher education, the higher positions that you take on, you have to be more concerned about in terms of, you might just want to have a simple party, but I got to worry about who's going to get hurt at the party. You see what I mean? And so when you think about the challenges, I think the challenges are simply more surrounding around the challenge of learning new things. Remember, I'm a Du Bois scholar. I'm in literature. But every new position I took on, I told the sister back there, I coordinated the Ronald McNair program. Well, that was a challenge because I had to recruit students. And then I became a director, and then you're associate vice president for academic affairs, now became a chief of staff to a president and an assistant provost and a vice president. So each new experience in higher ed is really what will help you with your ascent, and it's inherently going to be wrapped in a challenge. One of the things I should tell you as connecting your question to leadership is most people sort of want to ascend to these roles, but generally speaking, your ascent is going to be wrapped in problems. Most of the time, you're not going to be giving a situation where it's, I don't know, you just sit around and don't do anything. So every role you take on is going to be wrapped in a challenge. And, you know, the question is, will you have the courage to take on the challenge? Well, I don't want to do that. But if you take on the challenge and overcome that challenge, then that's one more hole in the belt. And then you learn from that experience, you keep gaining and gaining and gaining experiences. So I think that the most difficult challenge was being willing to have enough courage to take on the challenges. I mean, we always talk about things, but when the rubber hits the road, at the end of the day, the question is, do you have enough courage to, and here's the thing, the courage to fail. I mean, no one's perfect. You know, I hadn't made all the right decisions and the right, everything. He hasn't gone just a pure straight line. There's a wonderful little small book they called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, and most people see a person ascend to success and say, man, how lucky he is, how great he is, but they don't know the dark hours. You don't know the mistakes. You don't know the people that were against you and saying things. And really, to be honest, you know, if you learn how to suffer, you're going to learn how to succeed. Meaning you're going to suffer in life anyway, you might as well suffer while succeeding. So learn how to properly suffer, and properly suffering means taking on different challenges, knowing it's going to be tough, but if you believe in your heart that you got what it takes, you're going to win regardless, because even in a loss, it's only a loss if you don't get a lesson out of it. So I hope that's a quick way to kind of sum that up. Thank you.
How you doing, Dr.
Hey, how you doing?
I just wanted to ask you a question.
Speak up for me a little bit, brother.
Where you from, Gary?
Okay, I'm Gary Pritchard. I'm a mass communications major from Chicago, Illinois. This is my third year down here. Since this is all a place where we're here to grow and develop, I know you're familiar with the saying, the higher you go, the less of us as African Americans you're going to see. So as a person who has achieved what you could say maybe is the highest, you know, the highest of the high, how do you feel about diversity and inclusion, being a black man, moving up the ladder?
Yeah, well, I had not heard that saying, the saying of the higher you go, the less of us you'll see. I hadn't heard of that particular saying, honestly. But it is a fact, as it were, that first of all, as minorities in a predominantly majority culture, just by statistics alone, you're going to be in the minority. Whether you're talking about the masses of individuals or whether it's, you know, moving into bigger positions. And the reality is that in any economic system or any position here at this university, it's fewer roles at the top, obviously, and there's always going to be more roles at the bottom. Now, how do I feel? One of the things I don't like to talk a great deal about is feelings. I like to talk about functions. I like to talk about you know, you want to know how I feel about it, look at my record and what I do. But the point is, yeah, in higher education, I'm very much concerned with making sure that there's much more of a representative face that, frankly, represents a much more diverse culture. You'll find that not only in higher education, but in leadership organizations throughout the nation, increasingly, you're going to have an increasingly diversified population in the workforce. And obviously, situations like this come few and far between, where minorities are able to sit with another minority face and talk about who is a CEO or a leader. And that's one of the reasons why taking the time out to come speak with you is very important. Harkening back to his question, we got our hard work cut out for us. We need more people. It's not going to be a panacea, if you will, a simple remedy where Dr. Brian Johnson alone is going to solve all the problems. Dr. Brian Johnson can do what he can do, but I'm going to need you and you and you and all of you to do things as well. And so how I feel about diversity and inclusion, well, I feel that it's necessary, but I also know that it's going to be a lot of hard work. Historically, the historical record has told us that. The 60s has taught us that. And I think the 21st century is equally teaching us that. And the same issues that Booker T. Washington, W. Du Bois, Fred Douglass, Mary McLeod Bethune-Cookman, all of the Sojourner Truth, if you read their narratives, you read their stories, these are the same issues in many ways that we're confronted with now. So I encourage you to take a look at those narratives, but also understand that what I feel about it is what I'm doing.
How you doing, Doctor?
How you doing? Are you close enough for it?
My name's Antoine Wayne. I'm a sophomore here.
Okay.
Pre-nursing major from Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
I wanted to know, by being one of the youngest persons selected to be Tuskegee's president at the age of 40, how were you able to bring new ideas to the table while upholding the tradition of Tuskegee University, while being such a young age?
Oh, wow, I appreciate that. I always like to correct a little bit on that, because actually 4 of the 7 presidents were 40 years old or younger, including me. Booker T. Washington was 25 years old when he started Tuskegee in 1881. Most people, I'm like, dude, I'm behind. So that's the first point. But obviously, you make a good point. One of the things you guys see here is when you're at an institution that's as eminent, as renowned as Tuskegee, we know the tradition. The theme of my 7th presidency is trust the Tuskegee tradition, trust the Tuskegee trajectory. You talk about new ideas, new innovations. One of the things about tradition is that you really don't have to, if you will, replace tradition. What you want to do is do what? Add on to tradition. The names of Robert R. Taylor, who recently had a stamp named after him due to his architectural work at Tuskegee. Booker T. Washington, the first African American to appear on a U.S. postal stamp. George Washington Carver. You hear in the stories of the Tuskegee Airmen. You hear of all of these great names there associated with the institution. Those legacies are intact and will forever be. But when you talk about leadership, well, what are you going to be about? Well, I'm in the 21st century, so I'm pleased to say I've been there 313 days. We've already started online degree programs for the first time in the history of the institution. We already have online transcripts available in the history of the institution. In the history of the institution, we have a music degree program. Beyond that, we're doing a number of different things. I'm involved in the university right now in a university-wide strategic planning. Presidents must fundraise, and so obviously in my first 8 months, I had my first $500,000 plus gift. So when you talk about newness, obviously in the span of my first year, we have some pretty significant things, and certainly I invite you to take a look also at tuskegee.edu to take a look at what we got going and our top news and TU in Focus, as well as the President's Office website to take a look at, okay, what do we got going. In particular, I would invite you all to take a look at what's called our working visioning document. A vision document is just simply a visual document of what is Tuskegee and what is this presidency and the institution doing to project its trajectory. However, it's not a strategic plan. We're in the process of creating a plan, but it's almost a one-pager to kind of give people a vision about how are we moving from the current environment, meaning a current environment that's not a question of whether it's good or bad, it's just this is current. But then you want to say vision is about target environment. And I will tell you one thing, when you talk about leadership, particularly in the 21st century, there's a gentleman, Walter Bennis. He does a lot of leadership books, and he basically translates leadership as the ability to take vision and make it into reality. So at the end of the day, you know, if you got a vision but you don't have any execution, Thomas Edison says you're having a hallucination. So I always like to point out to all of you that everything you see or hear of me, you could always go and look me up. And I don't really, let me just tell you a little bit about Booker T. Washington you brought up. If you ever follow me on Instagram or Twitter, you always see me say, Booker T. Washington, he says, let examples answer. Let examples answer. Well, what do you feel? Just go look me up. You want to know what I feel? You can see all my commentary. I write daily commentaries on Booker T. Washington. I'm an open book. I always say, don't just write a book, be a book. So when you talk about what am I doing, really it's already going to be out there what I'm doing. And so I encourage you to take a look and read up on me, and most importantly, read up on Tuskegee University. Not that I'm trying to steal y'all or anything like that, but I do like to offer these nuggets, and I hope that these are some good nuggets for you with leadership I believe in, like Booker T. Washington, when he says, let examples answer. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like, let the examples answer. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking words. I don't need to do long bio. You want to know what am I doing? Just, you go to the website and just look at it and read it. But then the other thing is, I believe, and I learned this a long time ago, you talk about being successful as a leader. What you need to always learn is to never ever offer words without an accompanying work. What does that mean? Oftentimes in this society, we now have people who sit back and we all can be armchair quarterbacks. You ask all these questions. We on social media. We're all geniuses now because you got a social media account. But at the end of the day, you raising a question ain't no work. And I do mean ain't intentionally. What it means is you are referring to somebody that may actually be doing work. And there's a gross difference. See, sometimes we think that working and words are the same. It's really not. So a lot of people got a lot of words. But like Booker T. Washington, over a 34-year period, starting an institution at 25, dying at 59 years old, dying when there are 1,500 students, when there are now 3,100. This man's works stand, and we all talk about him today. That's the kind of legacy you want to leave, and that's generally not going to be found in, well, what did you say on Facebook, or what did you write in a book? He wrote books, but I think most of you hadn't read most of his books, but what you know of is what? Tuskegee University, Tuskegee Institute, Tuskegee Normal School. So at the end of the day, I always believe in that, and so you want to learn about what I'm doing trajectory-wise, take a look at our university website, news feed, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and everything else, and we'll give you more. We'll give you a lot to think about.
Thank you.
Brother Greg.
Good afternoon, Dr. Johnson. I want to thank you for your time.
Sure.
I'm Gregory Collins, a third-year student here. I am a Spanish major with a minor in Peace and International Studies. But I just had one question.
Sure.
You know, as a young 22-year-old student in college yourself, did you see yourself here today?
Wow, man.
You know, because I could go from day to day, and I don't see. You know, there's a motto. You know, what they see is what they'll be. You know, and I look at that, and my question to you is, as a young 22-year-old yourself, did you see yourself here today?
Let me tell you two things, one of which you'll find a real important article that I wrote at age 22, and I didn't name it then, I'm sure Howard can get it to you, but the editor of the newspaper titled it "A Young Man Apart, a World Apart." It described my experiences coming out of an inner city environment, having that summer worked at the State Bureau of Investigation, sharing my story at the time. I'll give you two additional sayings. We got sayings going around here. And these are mine. First of all, I believe this very strongly. What you consistently read, you're going to consistently become. I didn't know it at the time. But you see, when you ask me what's my story, or when you ask me who are African Americans, who are the African American leaders, I got different ideas of who were African American leaders. I'm telling you, I'm Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Mary McCall, Bethune-Cookman, Sojourner Truth. That's who I think about. And over time, those numbers spell out. John Lewis and, you know, just a number of people, because I read about them. So what'll happen in that period, you'll eventually become it. The other piece I would offer too is instinctively, I believe in, you know, you want to be the change you want to see in the world. See, I believe that I'm a 17th, 19th century Americanist in some ways, and not in some ways, but that was my training. And Ralph Waldo Emerson has this book and an essay, The American Scholar, and he talks about all of us have a peculiar fruit that we must bear. It's not gonna, like, you were born uniquely, and really you hear stories and thoughts about, oh, you want to be like him. You want to be, no, you're supposed to be like you. Nobody else is going to be like you. So really, if you kind of stick to your instincts, another quote, he says, if a man or a woman indomitably plants himself upon his instincts, because that's really what's going to be unique to you, eventually the whole world going to come around to you, because all you're doing is being you, you see. So I didn't really think about it like that. I was just trying to be me. Y'all here, do you. Like, I'm just doing me. Like, I just do me. Like, I don't really get into, I'm always be me, the person behind the position. Positions change, but the person, that's the only constancy you're ever going to have in life. So you commit yourself to being the best you. And then the third thing I will say about whether I was thinking about this at age 22, and again, I encourage you to take a look at that autobiographical article, because I always go back and think about what was I thinking about. Well, I also know that you literally, it's very difficult to go somewhere that you can't at first picture yourself going. You see what I mean? Like, it's very tough to say, oh, I want to go to Africa or visit Europe, if you didn't first conceive in your mind that I can see myself in Africa. So, of course, over the course of that time, as I indicated, moving from professor, scholar, administrator, as you, as it were, get a vision for your future. Booker T. Washington talks about how when he was a child, he used to imagine what he would do when he ascended to a position of leadership. His seminal work is the 1901 publication of Up From Slavery. It was an autobiography. He was basically telling people, you know, this is what I thought. And I was always picturing what I would be when I got to wherever I was going. So I'm a big proponent, and in fact, I should also make this plug for Booker T. Washington's disrespect as well. He was not just simply about training the hands of a people. He was about training the heart of a people, the head of a people, and the hands of a people. You know, you can have a good heart, but you don't have a good head, you're gonna still have some challenges. You can work real hard, but you can be working hard doing the wrong thing. You have a good heart, but you don't have a good head and good hands, and you get a good heart, but what is that going to help? He believed in very strongly making sure you had heart, head, and hands. And I really firmly believe that the development of our minds is something that we need to do and think more deeply about. And at 22, what I did not know is that I was really doing a lot of development of my mind. I wasn't made to read and write. Like, I love reading and write. Like, you don't have to pay me to read and write. Like, I'm looking to read a book tonight, you know, like, and you can't not understand or appreciate the importance of your own personal development, because you're the only person you're going to ever have in life. So if you don't spend some time with them, then, you know, you're going to have some real challenges. So I encourage you to think about it that way. But no, I did not think at 22 I'd be the 7th president at age 40 of Tuskegee University. But I knew something probably would come.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Reginald Hamilton.
Okay.
I'm a third-year junior. My major is political science with a minor of secondary education. Being a man that was in the field of education, what aspects of Booker T. Washington's N.W.E. Du Bois ideologies did you embody, and what would you recommend that us as young black males, what aspects should we embody?
Oh, I appreciate that. Let me also point out, if you're ambitious enough, I've written 2 books on W. Du Bois, and I do a daily commentary on Booker T. Washington. So if you want to do additional reading on what I think about them individually, you can take a look at that. But to your question, the biggest piece for me, and this is, I loved Booker T. Washington before becoming the president of Tuskegee University. Up From Slavery, in many ways, was my story. Coming from the inner city, going to a historically black institution, overcoming obstacles that really is, quite frankly, the definition of success. Same thing with W. Du Bois. Although he was born in the Northeast, he had to overcome a lot of obstacles because of the color of his skin. Although he was the smartest in his Great Barrington High School, although he was eligible to go to Harvard, but he had to go to an African-American HBCU, Fisk, because he was not allowed in his first 2 years to go to Harvard. But I think, to answer your question more directly, the biggest takeaway I have for them both, while they both were deeply concerned about the issues confronting their community, which I think we all must always focus on and be aware of, but they were equally concerned about how do we, within our own community, help ourselves and do things. They both had different treks about doing it. Du Bois was much more scholarly. He was an independent sort of thinker, writer, periodical writer. Booker T. Washington was an institution builder. He was a president. He had students. He was a CEO. But all the same, they spent a lot of time talking in their own ways about what's called uplift or reform or okay, we know this is happening out there, and that might still keep happening. But the question is, what are we gonna do, like, while we sitting around talking about all that? You see, and they spent a lot of time talking about we need to develop ourselves. You got to work on your own economic independence. You need to read. You need to write. You need to have some self-development. So I think that I'm very sensitive to, and obviously I have 2 African-American sons, and I'm an African-American myself, and we are in some difficult times, but these times are not in any wise different from many of the times we've experienced in a nation. And in all of those times, you've seen the movie Selma. Look at them. These were college graduates, college-trained men and women marching. These were men and women who knew who they were. These were men and women, although they were fighting against injustices, at the same time they were also handling and taking care of their business. You see them with their ties and their suits and their hat, walking self-possessed, knowledgeable, could read, write, think, and speak. Yeah, they were still dealing with some issues, but Martin Luther King Jr. was trained. You know, he wasn't. You know, he was a minister of faith, but he was also a PhD in systematic theology. Coretta Scott King was also, a pianist, and she was Spelman trained. All of these historic figures weren't just, walking on the streets getting beat up. They kind of went out there in a calculated way, like, we're educated, we're well-read, we're smart. And yes, in spite of that, we still have challenges. But we're better armed and better prepared to deal with them by being educated ourselves. So I think the biggest thing I would recommend that I think you could take from both Booker T. Washington as well as W. Du Bois is the idea of internally and inwardly, whether as a person or as a community, in addition to dealing with issues that confront the community, what is it that within the community that we should probably do? And at the end of the day, I always believe change begins with you. Before you start trying to lead somebody else, what are you doing? Like, what works as an individual before you try to lead a group of people? Like, what are you leading yourself really well? Like, if I examine you over a 24-hour day, like, would I want to follow myself? You see what I'm saying? Like, and that's a real question, and I think Booker T. Washington, W. Du Bois answered. I had to answer that. Again, I'm very serious about it. Never offer words without an accompanying work. I mean, would I follow myself? You see what I'm saying? Before I even became president. I just became president a year ago. But I would follow myself. I love myself. I like the lifestyle I have. And so, obviously, when you love yourself and you like yourself and you can lead yourself, then, of course, lead your family and lead people who have regarded you as a leader, not because you self-impose yourself as a leader, but they say, no, I follow you, I like you. Then I think it becomes easier to try to transcend one's personal leadership to a broader leadership.
Thank you. So, 2 final notes. We got 2 questions, and then, gentlemen, before we open it up, I'm gonna ask that you stick around for a picture right before.
Yeah, I definitely need a picture with you guys. You guys look all serious and sober. It's a great program.
They actually dress like this every day.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Speaking of which, listen, I went to school and I had never wore a suit and tie. But they couldn't get me out of a suit and tie when I was in college, man, because I was like, man, I want to dress like Du Bois and those guys, because I mean, honestly, the whole idea of a tie makes your head stand up straight. You walk straighter. You act a little. That's me. You might not. I'm not telling you that, but I'm saying in college, that's how I felt. Like, I felt more scholarly. I felt like sitting up in the front of the class. I always sit in the front of the class too. So those were just things that I just wanted to point out about ties and dress.
Thank you. And we got Brother Roger, and we're going to hit it off right here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Roderick Robbins. I'm a sophomore here, psychology major, business administration minor. And my question to you is, it's not particularly about leadership, but I'm sure you can relate it to leadership somehow, some way. Why did you pick to go to an HBCU and then to go into administration in an HBCU? And then why would you, and if so, why would you recommend an HBCU to a high school student about to go into the college sector?
Yeah, that's a broad question. I'll do my best to answer it. First of all, I'm a graduate of an HBCU. I never intended to go into administration at HBCU or PWI or otherwise in the purest sense. I shared a little bit earlier with some people about, well, how did you make the decision to be a president? Well, I don't really believe calling is like that. It's like I went to college, I wanted to be an 8th grade middle school teacher. My honors director said you should consider being a college professor. I started training in the Mellon program, and they said, well, you can be a college scholar professor and write books. Then in graduate school, someone said you can help coordinate, you can direct and coordinate the Ronald McNair program. And so I began doing administration. Then I began doing professor, scholar, administrator all at the same time. And then presidents would say, you can be a president. So nothing in that analysis was just purely HBCU, although some of the experience was at HBCU, some of them were at PWIs. Okay. Now, the value claim, and again, I'm very sensitive to this because all of you are here at a predominantly white institution, but historically, one of the purposes of an HBCU, and I think Dr. Ramsey has probably shared that perspective, was that it was probably one of the last opportunities that you would have, you know, if you assume that you come out of a predominantly African-American community or even family, you matriculate to a college, and in the HBCU environment, historically, you learned more about your history, your stories. It was an experience that wasn't confined to one area of the university. And similar to the many persons in Selma who are HBCU graduates, many of the most African American JDs, PhDs, you know, they first matriculated in HBCUs where that grounding, that identity formation, the camaraderie, many of their best friends, relationships, history, although obviously they have challenges, grounded them to prepare them to then matriculate to a predominantly white institution where they once again become a minority, but they have enough sense of who they are that they understand that dynamic. Now, again, I'm not saying that to suggest to all of you that one is better than the other. I don't know where my children will go. I personally am not going to dictate what you must do, but I will say that if I wanted to make the value claim, obviously as a president of an HBCU, particularly the president of Tuskegee University, that there are a number of things that we believe is value added. Not only you're going to get a top flight education, which Tuskegee University students are the best and brightest in our eyes, as obviously the president. We are, you know, our students have options. They could have attended institutions like this or other institutions as well. So when they come, they make a calculated decision to come not just simply for the curriculum, but the co-curricula, opportunities to lead in ways, to absorb the history of the institution, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously as a president of a university, you're always going to make the value claim for your university, but I just wanted to talk in some broad terms. But all the same, I would encourage all of you, regardless of where you are, to still foster the kinds of community which it seems like Brother Jones and Dr. Ransby are doing, where you can still have a similar experience whereby you're reading together, you're learning together, you're drawing upon the experiences, because the African American experience, the HBCU experience, I argue, is the America's experience, it's the world's experience. It's not confined to you being on that campus, but obviously we think that obviously it's an experience that we would hope many more students would like to come, and if you don't come, maybe you'll send your sons and daughters to Tuskegee University in the future.
Okay. So
let's give them a hand,
yeah.
folks.